The director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency suddenly made a secret visit to Moscow but was caught by the media. So, what exactly is the reason for this? Because the last time the CIA director visited Moscow was 5 years ago, and 3 months later, the war between Russia and Ukraine broke out. Also, the U.S. has stopped global immigration visas. Who is this targeting? Why did they stop it? How long will it be stopped for? What does this mean for Chinese people? This is another topic we'll be discussing today. Also, there's been a major flash flood on the border between Tibet and Nepal, which may have resulted in thousands of deaths. All right, welcome to Good Morning America, brought to you by Sound of Hope. Hello to our YouTube viewers, and hello to our listeners on Sound of Hope Silicon Valley FM 96.1. All right, first up, the first piece of news, the CIA director suddenly, in a suddenly and secretly flew to Moscow. What's going on? This was on Tuesday. The U.S. CIA director, John Ratcliffe, suddenly visited Moscow. Actually, this is something the White House didn't mention at all. It was caught by the media. So regarding the whole process, the plane Ratcliffe took was a Boeing C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft, which is a military plane. And then, on Tuesday, it flew out from Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland and then flew to Riga, the capital of Latvia, which is northwest of Russia. There, it stopped for a bit and then flew on to Moscow's International Airport. So, at the airport, Moscow International Airport, the media caught sight of an American diplomatic motorcade, so it was quite a formal affair. However, he left after staying in Moscow for just 4 hours. Now, everyone is guessing why. Because, for the CIA director to make a special trip to Moscow, this is a very, what you'd call, rare occurrence. When was the last time this happened? It was in November 2021, during the Biden era, this event. And the CIA director who visited Moscow at that time, his name was William Burns. And then, after the visit, what was the purpose of that trip? It was to warn Putin not to invade Ukraine, and by citing evidence collected by the U.S. to tell Russia that we know what you were doing. Of course, we know the result. 3 months later, Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine. So what did the CIA director go there for this time? Because the U.S. has many other presidential envoys, it could say, right? The president himself could also make a phone call. Indeed, the U.S. currently has no ambassador in Moscow, but there are plenty of civilian officials who could handle this. Why arrange for an intelligence chief to go there? This is a very, very intriguing matter. And the Kremlin spokesperson, Peskov, said, "We have not scheduled any meetings between Putin and any representatives of the Trump administration this week." Right, and then, according to the Kremlin, Putin indeed did not meet with Ratcliffe, but he did have a dialogue with the Russian intelligence chief, the intelligence department. So basically, we know the situation, right? Since it wasn't scheduled, it must be that the Americans wanted to go themselves. And the U.S. requested Ukraine last week. The news we have now is that they asked them not to launch airstrikes on Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the surrounding areas of northern Russia this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because a plane carrying senior U.S. officials would be flying to the Russian capital. So they wanted to go last week, and they told Ukraine, "Don't attack, your drones are flying everywhere, what if they hit our plane?" So this is something that has already been communicated. As for the actual reason for the visit, what is it? Nobody knows. The White House is keeping its lips sealed. Actually, just before I came on the show, the media personality Glenn Beck interviewed Trump and asked him directly what he was going there for. Trump said it's nothing, really, nothing special. He said it was a semi-routine drill. What does that mean? It's just a common thing, like a routine matter, called just a semi-routine matter. He said this war in Russia, the war with Ukraine, shouldn't happen, this and that. And in the end, he only said half of it, saying maybe later we'll know. So Trump is saying, oh, don't pay attention to it. There's definitely something going on. So we just don't know what the actual reason is. Right now, everyone is guessing all over the place. So the first possibility is that because the U.S. just imposed what you might call Normandy-level landing-style sanctions on Iran, all countries should cut off commercial ties with Iran, otherwise they will face secondary sanctions. And besides the CCP, the other major power that is essentially the only other one providing a lifeline to Iran is Russia. So sending the CIA director to deliver a warning in person, well, that's a serious matter. That's the first possibility. The second, according to the Wall Street Journal, is that the U.S. has gathered intelligence indicating that the Russian military is conducting a mobilization, perhaps intending to test NATO's resolve by launching a small-scale probing attack against it. So Ratcliffe went to warn Putin, saying, "We see what you're doing, don't do it, we already know." And third, the UK's Daily Mail reported that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was informed that because he had just visited Kyiv, Russia might launch a military strike against the UK in retaliation for Britain's support of Ukraine. And wow, good grief, the UK is a heck of a long way from Russia. And fourth, there's the idea that Russia is going to use tactical nuclear weapons on Ukraine because, well, they're increasingly losing the drone war. Just yesterday, there was news that an oil field 6,000 kilometers away from Ukraine was hit. So this was originally expected to be hit next year, but it's been hit now. So clearly, in this so-called drone warfare, Russia is increasingly at a disadvantage. If they get desperate, will they pull out nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons? So which scenario will it be? Let's make a guess, shall we? Because the White House really hasn't said a word, but something is definitely going on. If you ask me, why don't we do a poll? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 reasons. First, the Iran issue, ensuring Russia complies with U.S. sanctions. Second, Russia testing NATO with small-scale offensives. Third, retaliation against the UK. And fourth, the potential use of small-scale nuclear weapons. Which possibility do you think it is? Or maybe there's a fifth possibility. But regardless, I think Burns going there, she's an intelligence official. Her going there definitely involves saying, "Russia, what are you doing that we've seen?" So let me tell you, we saw it, our intelligence agency saw it, and I'm here to tell you not to do this, to stop Moscow from taking major action. As for which one it is, if you ask me, I think the first possibility, which is asking Russia to help with sanctions, I don't think that's very likely, right? Because for that kind of thing, it would be best for Trump to just make a phone call. Why would you need the head of an intelligence agency to go? Any Secretary of State could go, or a presidential envoy could go, so why would you need an intelligence official to go? As for the other three possibilities, like launching an attack on NATO, I think the likelihood is also very low. They can't even handle Ukraine, and they want to attack NATO? Attacking the UK is pretty much the same as attacking NATO, right? The fourth one is the scariest, right? He wants to use tactical nuclear weapons. Is that possible? I personally think there is a certain possibility. What do y'all think? Right, okay, so next, let's talk about something that Chinese people are very, very concerned about. Trump officially announced yesterday that he is temporarily suspending global so-called immigration visas. What's going on with that? Right, so here's the situation. This immigration visa suspension was officially announced yesterday, but it's actually been in effect for 2 days already, starting the day before yesterday. So what's the reason for this? They say our global consular officers need to undergo in-depth training to effectively screen out people who shouldn't be coming to the United States in the future. Why is this training suddenly happening at this time? Who are the people who shouldn't be coming to the United States? So what's really going on? Why? How long will it last? Who does it affect? These are the topics we'll be discussing next. We all know that since the Trump administration took office, they've been tightening up both immigrant and non-immigrant visas. So, what's called non-immigrant? Not illegal immigrants, but non-immigrant visas. The background of this action was actually triggered by a ruling 5 days ago from the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. And this ruling, well, it goes back to an executive order from Trump in January. Well, it wasn't an executive order, it was an action by the State Department. On January 14th of this year, Secretary of State Rubio announced a freeze on immigrant visas for 75 countries, meaning you people from those 75 countries don't come. We're freezing everything. Which countries are they? Well, it's mostly third world countries, impoverished countries or countries that are a bit chaotic, like Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Cuba, Egypt, and, well, a bunch of European countries too, plus Haiti, Iran, and it also includes Russia. Yes, Russia too, plus Mongolia, and then Pakistan and Thailand, 75 countries in total. So what's the reason? The reason is that over 30% of immigrant families from these countries receive public assistance, and there is large-scale public welfare fraud. This is referring to what happened with the Somali community in Minnesota. His point is that this is happening on a large scale in different places among immigrants from these countries, so they are considered high-risk groups for becoming a public charge. So this freeze on the 75 countries is intended to last until the U.S. can ensure that new immigrants won't, as they say, extract wealth from the American people or take advantage of Americans. So after this decision came out, it was immediately taken to court. The Catholic Legal Immigration Network, along with some individuals, 6 individuals, sued the Trump administration and Rubio in federal court. So, 7 months later, the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York issued a ruling. This was last Friday, August 21st, stating that this action by the State Department is invalid. Why? They said it constitutes discrimination based on nationality. The U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act prohibits denying immigrant visas based solely on nationality. The judge ruled the Secretary of State lacks authority to ban specific countries. Regarding the public charge rule, it must be applied case by case, not by nationality. It requires individual evaluation. Consequently, the State Department indicated they may appeal the decision. Of course, this happened last Friday. Today's Wednesday, so 3 days later, on Monday, the State Department rolled out what's called a total ban on immigrant visas. By Monday, the State Department had already started sending out emails, canceling immigrant visa interviews that had already been scheduled at consulates and embassies. And the reason given is that we need training. Training for what? The State Department has rolled out something called the Worldwide Training Program, which requires all consular officers to complete in-depth training on the new version of the so-called Public Charge Determination Guidelines before they can continue conducting interviews with immigrant applicants. So how long will that take? I don't know. Maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe 3 months, who knows? And in terms of actual implementation, the U.S. administration does indeed have enough discretionary power. If they really don't want to do this, it's entirely possible for them to drag it out for a month or two under the guise of training. Anyway, they're the ones who set the timeline. Congress can't possibly be that specific. Right, I want to talk about what the essence of this matter is. The essence of this is just finding another way to achieve what the 75-country ban in January couldn't accomplish. So who is affected? Right, who exactly is affected? Of course, it's not like the 75-country ban that involved everyone, so who exactly does this involve? Let me give you all a straightforward answer. It's family-based immigration. Family-based immigration. What is family-based immigration? I'll talk about that in a bit. So, in short, it doesn't apply to what are called non-immigrant visas. For example, if you're coming to the U.S. to study on a student visa, or coming to the U.S. for tourism on a tourist visa, or coming to the U.S. on a business visa. What are these called? Official business. So, none of these are affected. What is affected are called immigrant visas. So, who is it who has an immigrant visa? Can you just come to the U.S. and get an immigrant visa right away? Well, yeah, many people can get one. In what kind of situation? As everyone knows, this immigration issue is a major problem that the Trump administration is currently facing. There are 2 types of immigration. One is called illegal immigration, and the other is called legal immigration. Regarding illegal immigration, Trump's solution involves 2 methods. One is building a border wall, a physical barrier. The second is to abolish birthright citizenship, so that to remove the incentive for illegal immigrants to come to the U.S. to have children so that their descendants can become Americans. Sorry. It's to abolish that incentive. That's what I mean. Alright, so basically, the border wall was a success, but birthright citizenship was essentially a failure. Trump later signed some executive orders regarding what's called birth tourism to crack down on people coming to the U.S. just to have children. But he wasn't able to abolish birthright citizenship. Okay, so that's how illegal immigration was handled. What about legal immigration? Would Trump oppose legal immigration? Basically, no. But there are major flaws within legal immigration. What do you mean by that? As you know, before 1965, how was immigration handled in the U.S.? It was called proportional quotas. In other words, before that, the number of people from each country who could immigrate to the U.S. was allocated based on the existing proportion of immigrants from those countries in the U.S. at the time. For example, there were more white people in the U.S., right? So, white majority countries received larger quotas. And for countries with smaller populations or fewer people of that race, the allocated proportion was smaller. This means that no matter how many immigrants came to the US or how much the population grew, the proportions remained unchanged. The proportions of national origins or races stayed the same. That's what it meant. In 1965, amidst the civil rights movement, U.S. immigration laws shifted significantly. It no longer mattered where you were from. Everyone was treated equally, reflecting the era's spirit of equality. But what did immigration change to? It shifted towards skilled immigration. Essentially, if you're a skilled worker meeting specific requirements, you can immigrate. This is known as skilled immigration. The H-1B visa, which can lead to a green card, created this path. I believe this skilled immigration policy is excellent, and facts prove it. It allows the U.S. to absorb top global talent. Later, for humanitarian reasons, they added family-based immigration, allowing you to sponsor parents and siblings to join you in the United States. But parents can come over quite quickly. For siblings, you have to wait over a dozen years now, but eventually they can come. As a result, this little humanitarian crack that was opened, which was originally thought to be just a side path, ended up becoming the main channel. Because once you're here, you bring over your siblings, and your siblings have their own families, so they can bring over their own in-laws, their parents, and they all have their own siblings too. It's like a bunch of grapes just coming in a continuous stream, and they're mainly coming from Central and South America. So today, or rather last year, legal immigration in the U.S., specifically humanitarian and family-based immigration, accounted for 65% of the total number of legal immigrants. The original goal of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act was to shift from proportional immigration by country to skill-based immigration, but in the end, that only accounted for 17% of the total number of immigrants. So the ratio of family-based immigration to skill-based immigration is about 4-to-1. Of course, there are also refugees and political asylum seekers, which account for 9%, and there's also the lottery. The U.S. actually has a lottery system. Regardless of the country, the U.S. sets aside a certain number of spots for a lottery. If you win, you can come to the U.S. and get a green card, which accounts for 6%. So among legal immigration, family-based immigration is the real big issue the U.S. is facing right now. Initially, it was just a small opening, a side path, out of humanitarian considerations, but it ended up becoming, wow, a massive river of legal immigration pouring in. So it basically changed the original intention, right? It started as a small part, but now it's become the biggest part. It's completely distorted from what it was supposed to be. So how do you stop it? How do you stop this massive river from pouring in? There's no way to stop it, because it was set by Congress in 1965. Democrats were happy with the system, believing new immigrants would vote for them, so they resisted change. With American politics split down the middle, their opposition blocks any reform. That is why, despite constant talk, immigration reform never happens. No matter how many times you say it, not just 3 times, but 30 times, it's useless. So this 1965 law can't be changed. Okay, so what can be done? They just keep coming in an endless stream, right? Everyone says that on this planet, you can connect with anyone else through just 7 degrees of separation. So if you follow that logic, with this family-based immigration, given enough time, half the people on Earth could end up in the United States, right? It's just like a bunch of grapes. It's just, this chain of sibling relationships just keeps stringing along. So in this family-based immigration, it has no cap. For things like skilled immigration, like H-1B visas, the H-1B path to skilled immigration has a cap, but family-based immigration has no cap. So what can be done about that? That is a problem, So there is a way to deal with this. You see, there is a provision in U.S. immigration law that says if a foreigner's entry would be detrimental to U.S. interests, they can be denied entry. And if you translate this detrimental to U.S. interest part, it becomes what's called a public charge. If you come to the U.S. and you can't support yourself, and the person who sponsored you won't give you money either, you'll end up on welfare, and you'll, become a detriment to U.S. interests. Because of this, they can block your entry, even if you have family here. The ban on these 75 countries is based on this policy. Since these nations are poor, the U.S. assumes you're only coming to take advantage of benefits rather than contribute, so they simply won't let you in. but it was blocked by the courts. Ah, so did the courts have a point in blocking it? They had a point too, right? Because honestly, saying that people from certain countries can't come here, that really was Trump's innovation. And the judge blocking him, you can understand that too. It's just that in the end, if he appeals all the way up to the Supreme Court, can he overturn it? But regardless, this is going to take a long time, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So now, the only remaining option for the Trump administration is to say that because you are a public charge, I won't let you in. They're using this as a dam to hold back the tide, no matter how big the river is, just like the border wall blocks illegal immigrants. They're using the public charge rule to block legal immigrants, to stem the influx of legal family-based immigrants. So basically, this time they are targeting family-based immigration and the lottery, people who come through the lottery. Actually, over 90% of family-based immigration is from Central and South America. While some Chinese immigrants use these channels, it's rare. Sibling visas take over a decade to process, and given China's development over the last 20 years, few are desperate to move. Most of what's being blocked is immigration from Latin America, where reaching the US still offers a significantly better life. So everyone knows that family-based immigration accounts for 65%, right? The visa lottery is 6%, which means these two combined make up 71%. Over 70% of this immigration volume is what Trump's global suspension order, not a ban, but a suspension of immigrant visas, covers, or rather what it targets. His goal is to slow down the pace of legal immigration, or more accurately, to slow down the pace at which family-based and lottery-based immigrants enter the country. And at the same time, he wants to send a message to everyone around the world who wants to immigrate to the United States. If you are poor, have no money, and have no skills, we don't want you. So it carries the same meaning as the ban on the 75 countries. Moreover, the State Department launched this global training program because since they can't just, make a blanket judgment, all the embassy and consulate officials have to make accurate assessments. So they need to complete this new version of training on how to specifically determine whether a person will become a public charge when coming to the U.S. They need in-depth training on these judgment criteria to handle it properly. That's what it means. So, in other words, you have to screen them one by one. So, speaking of this, I don't know, I wonder if any of our viewers here have been affected by this ban. That's why today's headline is so strong. Some self-media creators are saying, well, the headline basically says the U.S. has stopped all global visa issuance. No, global immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas are not being stopped. As for immigrant visas, they are mainly targeted at family-based immigration and the so-called lottery. Of course, if you're applying for an employment-based visa directly from China, well, does that exist? It does, but it's very, very, very rare. So I don't think it has a very big impact on the Chinese community. So have you been impacted? If you have been affected, please leave a comment. What do you all think about this policy? Please feel free to share your thoughts as well. Let me say it again, everyone. The feedback on my channel has been, it's been very, very active. It's really great. Thank you all. This is why I think these comments are part of public opinion. I've been collecting them on the side, and for one thing, I'll share them with everyone the next day. And in the future, I'll definitely put them to good use. So you're welcome to leave your comments here and express your views and opinions, okay? Okay, well, to put it bluntly, I don't think this matter has that big of an impact on Chinese people. But maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps many of us actually have a need for this. If your family needs to immigrate here, feel free to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Alright, next, let's talk about what kind of impact Trump's tightening of immigration policies will have on Chinese people in the US, those who are already here. Let me tell you a story first. Well, it's a true story, not just a story. It's a real event. A 38-year-old Chinese woman with the surname He took her child to Hawaii for a vacation at the end of July. After the vacation, when she returned to California and was picking up her luggage at the airport, she was arrested on the spot by US Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE agents. She is a Chinese citizen, and she entered the United States legally in October 2023 on a B2 tourist visa. This visa was valid for 6 months, so she was allowed to stay until April of the following year. As it turned out, in March of the following year, meaning while her tourist status was still valid, she filed an application for what's called political asylum on the grounds of religious belief. That application is still currently with the U.S. Immigration Agency, USCIS, awaiting processing, and no interview has been scheduled yet. Generally speaking, the wait time for political asylum interviews is really long now, sometimes as long as 5 or 6 years. And then, in September of that same year, 2024, she applied for and received what's called an employment authorization document, specifically a C08 category work permit. So first of all, her asylum application is in the normal queue, she has already obtained her work permit, and her life in the United States is in a normal state, with nothing unusual occurring. As it turns out, on July 28th, this year, July 28th, she took her child on a trip to Hawaii and was returning on a domestic U.S. flight to Ontario, California, Ontario International Airport. This refers to the one in Southern California, not the Ontario in Canada. When she was picking up her luggage, she was suddenly arrested. Then she was sent to the Adelanto ICE Processing Center in California for detention, where she was held for 3 weeks. She then filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus with the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California through her lawyer. As it turned out, the judge approved the application within a day of receiving it and ordered ICE to release her. So the issue here is, how could Miss He be arrested when she had clearly already applied for asylum and held a work permit while waiting for her asylum interview? Where exactly is the problem here? The key point is that having a pending asylum application does not mean an automatic extension of your previous B2 tourist status, and obtaining a work permit only means you can work legally in the United States. It does not equate to having legal immigration status. You might find that strange, thinking, I'm working legally, how can you say I don't have legal immigration status? This is what's called the gray area, this whole situation. If you entered the U.S. on an original B1 or B2 status that has already expired, and your asylum application is pending but hasn't been approved, your status at this point is actually in a gray area, which is quite precarious. You could say you have no status, or you could say, well, I'm here and I'm waiting. And in the Biden era, you were considered legal. But in the Trump era, well, it's anyone's guess. ICE can determine that if your visa's expired, you're a target for deportation. They can see it that way. So that's ICE's current stance. That's how they operate. If your visa's expired, you're a target for deportation. This is happening a lot now. ICE stopping cars on highways and streets to check. That happens all the time now. And in the past, at Home Depot, where these undocumented immigrants would look for work, ICE would go there to make arrests too. But every time they stopped people on the highway or at Home Depot, it caused a lot of disruption. So many people who are anti-ICE would gather, the media would follow, and sometimes it would even lead to conflicts. As a result, ICE has changed its tactics and is now setting up at airports. Because at the airport, when you enter, you have to show your ID, and your name gets entered into the system. Once that name is in the airport's computer, it connects to the ICE database, and immediately, as soon as a name is entered, they know whether that person's visa has expired. So when ICE comes to make an arrest, they get it right every time, with no disruption at all. They just take the person away on the spot. So that's why airports are so convenient for ICE, because the names and IDs are all right there. There's no disruption, and they can immediately and precisely use the least, what you'd call the least disruptive way to take someone into custody. So that's the current situation. So, fellow Chinese compatriots, if your immigration status isn't quite stable yet, there are lawyers advising that you should not take any unnecessary flights. Before you set off, make sure you have your status and case details sorted out. Don't treat your work permit or application receipt as a magic talisman, a protective charm. Many Chinese friends are worried, but I'm referring to those with legitimate reasons. I strongly disapprove of fraudulent U.S. asylum applications. I'm talking about people with valid claims, because the CCP truly persecutes ordinary citizens. Some have fled to the U.S. to escape religious persecution, and they are the ones the U.S. should protect. So, if you're worried, what should you do? I have 3 points of commentary. First, we are currently in a very unique situation. The midterm elections are just over 2 months away. So, regarding the midterm elections, what the Trump administration is very worried about is non-citizens voting, because the so-called Save America Act hasn't passed yet, right? Elections don't require ID. Almost anyone can go and vote. Or there are many people, many loopholes for what you might call illegal voting, so they are especially nervous before the midterm elections. So at this time, what the Trump administration wants to do is to remove illegal immigrants so that they cannot participate in U.S. elections. That's the first point. Second, to send a message, which is, you illegal immigrants in the U.S. better not mess around. Don't mess around, don't go and vote. This first point, this is a special situation. Secondly, when illegal immigrants truly become a burden on the country, it affects the national treasury. As everyone knows, many of the benefits in the U.S., like, Social Security or things like Medicare and Medicaid, many of them are processed, through the states. The federal government gives money to the states, and then the states give that money to you, to these illegal immigrants, and this also includes legal immigrants, right? They just go and apply, and they'll give it to them. So the policies vary from state to state.